Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. Today I'm going to talk to you guys about ABO versus CBO. What are the differences between the two? There's pros and cons of both. We actually use both at Rubato, so I'll talk to you about when and why. So starting with ABO, ABO stands for Ad Set Budget Optimization. This is the way that Facebook always was until about 2.5 years ago or so, whenever CBO was introduced, or Campaign Budget Optimization. Essentially, ABO is just setting your budget on the ad set level. You set up your campaign, you have your campaign objective, but then you control the budget on the ad set level. So when you set a particular budget for an ad set, it gives Facebook control over creatives. They can still choose which creatives they want to run, but they can't just choose amongst your ad sets. They have to spend the budget, whatever you've determined at that particular ad set. The pros of ad set budget optimization are that you can control the budget, so you can actually control what you are testing and making sure that you're getting that budget to each one of your audiences. So if you have 4 audiences and you have $1,000 of budget, you want to go ahead and make sure that each audience gets $250 of budget so that you really get a nice A/B test. If that were in a CBO, perhaps the CBO would choose one of the audiences to put almost all of the budget in. So you get that budget control on the ad set budget optimization level, or the ABO level. The other thing that's good for it is really lower spending accounts. CBO was built for scale, which we'll talk about here in a minute. And ABO is really nice for lower spending accounts. So if your account spends less than $500 a month, you should probably stick to ABOs. The cons to ABOs are it does not scale as well as CBO. You can still scale ABOs well, but not as well as a CBO typically. And the other thing is that ABOs do tend to saturate out audiences more heavily, because obviously you're forcing your budget into one particular audience, and in a CBO it's not like that. So you do tend to experience a little bit more audience saturation with ABO. Moving on to campaign budget optimization. This is where you're setting the budget on the campaign level, CBO, and that is where you can set $1,000 budget, for example, on the campaign. You can set up 3 to 4 audiences, or however many you want, and then you can set up all of your creatives within those audiences, and that $1,000 can be spent by Facebook in any place that it sees fit within that structure. So the pros of this, it scales so well. It's a really good play to scale things within an account. The second pro is that it does protect against audience saturation, because the algorithm essentially can determine which audiences to spend on different days, but it doesn't have to force spend to any one of those audiences. So it kind of keeps the system more fresh. The only con is that it does take enough budget to run these things. We find that under $500 a day of budget, probably don't mess with it. We see a lot of power behind it at $2,000 a day or more of budget. We just see a lot of power within a CBO. So determine whether or not your budget is really up there yet for a CBO, but it can be an excellent play for scale. Quickly chatting through when Rubato uses both. So we do use both, and most of our clients have a structure where we have a testing campaign and then an evergreen campaign, and on each level of traffic. So cold traffic, mid-funnel traffic, warm traffic, etc. So within these testing campaigns, there's 2 things that we're thinking about. Number 1, we don't have very high budgets typically to test. So that's the first thing that kind of moves those into the ABO bucket. And the second thing is we actually do want to force spend to certain audiences or creatives sometimes to really understand what is this audience? What is this creative? Is it actually performing well? So those are the 2 reasons. Within the testing campaigns, typically we run ABOs, and then we're almost always on CBOs for the evergreen campaign. So those are the ones that are just consistent performers. They're always performing well, and we want to try to scale those as much as we can. So typically those are in a CBO. So if you have any other questions, please let me know. There's obviously a lot that can be talked about with ABO versus CBO with little nuances, but those are the basics. Hit us up if you have any additional questions, or if you've used both and you have a particular strategy that really works well for you. We would love to hear from you.